Hey everybody, this is Rob, Frontline Mindset with National Fire Radio. Welcome back. This episode is actually kind of special to me because every now and then we get to do some pretty cool things. And one of the cool things I got to do today is interview one of my very good friends, Lieutenant Mark Bendel, recently retired from the Greenville Fire District. Mark and I literally go back like car seats. He's as cool as the other side of the pillow, and I'm excited to sit here and talk with him today. So Mark, welcome to Frontline Mindset, and thanks for coming on the show, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. I don't know how I can even top that.
Oh, don't worry about it. You're going to do fine. So, Mark, for the people that are out there, just kind of give us like a brief bio of like where you come from and like just a snippet of your like because I know a lot of people think you started in Fairview, but your kind of exposure to fire and EMS started way before that. So let's kind of dive into that a little bit real quick.
Yeah, a little bit. Mark Bendel. I grew up in East Haven, Connecticut, actually, which is down on the shoreline next to New Haven. Um, Growing up, my father was an auxiliary police officer, so I kind of got a little bit of exposure to fire and emergency services, more on the law enforcement angle. Um, and I joined the Boy Scouts when I was a teenager, became an Eagle Scout, and it was around then that a battalion chief from the East Haven Fire Department, God rest his soul, Bill Mayer, was one of our advisors and our leaders in Troop 401 in East Haven. And we did the Firemanship Merit Badge, and we got to go to the firehouse and learn about how our town's fire department worked. And I was intrigued. And as I graduated high school, the way that we were pushed in our town was to go to college, get a 4-year degree. At that time, it was computers, IT. That was the place to be career wise. And so I went to Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York. And my sophomore year, I remember being 19 years old on September 11th, 2001. We kind of watched as the world stopped turning a little bit around us. And it was about then that I realized that, my path in life was kind of forged from that point on. Went to volunteer at Fairview by that December of 2001. I was sworn in there as a volunteer. And my first summer off from college, they had the civil service test. Took the test with you in the same room because we both got hired off the same list in different departments,
Yeah.
right? And in September of 2003, I got interviewed by Fairview Fire, and I took a victory lap at Marist and went to the fire academy instead of starting my senior year of college. And the rest from there is a story that turned into my career in the fire service, finishing school while working full time at the firehouse, and where we are today.
Yeah, and I mean, it's important to note too. So Mark and I worked together both at Alamo EMS back in the days of commercial EMS, and then we also, while Mark was at Fairview, served as president and vice president together, and I think we got like a lot of leadership experience from that, just on some of the labor things that we handled, and it would be remiss to say that the Fairness for Fairview group that was out there was a taxpayer group out there trying to shut down the firehouse, and Mark came up with one of the most brilliant strategic campaigns ever. It was Solve, Don't Dissolve, and we had these signs everywhere in Dutchess County. Um, and then like the supporter shirts and everything else. So like there was another side of this equation as well. But Mark, you didn't stay at Fairview for your whole career. Kind of touch on like just a little bit, like you transferred down to the Greenville
Yeah.
Fire District.
Yeah. So I worked at Fairview Fire full time from 2003 until 2011. And in that time, we had a rather tumultuous situation in Fairview. There's a whole dynamic of how Fairview's structure is with taxes and fire taxes in New York and town law, and we can turn into firehouse lawyers if we wanted to, talking about that for an hour. But the hardest part of everything was watching the turnover happen. And I think when I left Fairview, we were down about 50% of our authorized staffing at that point. And um, man, getting down to Westchester, survivor's guilt first and foremost. I made it out and I made it to a different department, and I was really fortunate to go where I went. But I felt really bad for the people that were left behind at that point because Fairview was in like a rebuilding stage if we're going to compare it to a baseball team. I know that I think that's when Ryan and Terry were in the academy, and then they got Eric and Brad right afterwards as new hires. So I transferred to the Greenville Fire District in Westchester County, New York, town of Greenburgh, one of three departments in the town. And what attracted me there more than anything at the time was that they had a pretty robust special operations program in the way of tech rescue, hazardous materials, um, and stuff of that nature. And it was something that I wasn't able to get in Dutchess County at the time. We can go back in Fairview history for a minute here. And I was just talking to some other colleagues of ours about this today. When we needed a boat of some sort to access the Hudson River or a snowplow to plow the parking lot, and the commissioners told us that those were recreational toys and not tools that the fire department needed. So, that kind of drove me to look for a different challenge. And in 2011, I transferred to the Greenville Fire District in Westchester. Started over again as a firefighter on probation. Made it through my probationary year. 10 years later, in 2021, I was promoted to lieutenant, which I carried that rank through my retirement just about a month ago.
Yeah. And it's I think one of the things too, Mark, is that you know transferring was not an easy decision, but it was a decision that you had to make for you. And I know you talk about the survivor's guilt, but like even in today's day and age, I think that there's a lot of people that are out here, and I guess what I'm getting at is don't settle if you're not happy, because if you're not happy, you're not going to be in a good place, when it comes to the work life and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's a few things on that. First and foremost, I transferred because I was looking for a challenge, and I wanted the stress or the side effects of the job to be like, man, I'm tired because we were really busy and we were going on calls and doing really interesting stuff and doing a lot of training. And I didn't want the stress to be like, man, they said they're going to lay us off for the fourth time this year. Or, oh
Right.
my gosh, three more guys just left and now we have to work 96 hours a week to cover staffing. Um, and the other thing that I'll throw out there, Danny Nichols, a mutual friend of ours, he would always talk about how, on the volunteer side, people would be like, man, why would anyone ever want to take a sick day? And Danny said, at some point, even as a career firefighter, which is people's like dream job, like this is a profession and a job. And there's days that you're going to wake up and be sick. You don't want to go to work. But also going back to the transferring thing, like if you're in a situation that doesn't serve you, then there's no harm in looking to progress your career in another agency and looking for the organization that meets the values and the goals and the you know kind of the job you're looking for, I guess.
Yeah. 100%, man. So
Yeah.
fast forward, it's a short story long here. One of the other things that you have to, as a feather in your cap that you have, is that you're now an author. And
Yeah.
the reason that we're kind of here today is to talk about your book, Scout the Firehouse Mascot: A True Story.
Yep.
But before we talk about the book, I mean, like, where did let's kind of dive into where the book sprung its roots from.
So, man, this is going to be a hard one.
Yeah.
And so on August 30th, 2022, one of my firefighters died in a rather tragic incident off duty. And that's kind of where I'm going to leave it. This firefighter, Vito Sciavillo, was one of my best friends at the job, one of the nicest people you'd ever meet. And it rocked us. And I think the scary thing and the hardest part of it was we had to work the next day, our group. And we went into work the next day and we were running call after call after call, like zombies, because we were so shook. And to get to the positive part of this now, so Vito was a dog guy, loved dogs. And there was a yellow lab named Scout that would walk by the firehouse almost every day with his owner, Nicole. And Scout loved the fire department. Whenever he would see the rigs going up and down the avenue, he would literally lay down on the pavement. And when it was time for Scout to go, when Nicole was carrying on her walk, she had to lure him away with toys and treats. And Scout and Vito had a connection. Scout knew that Vito was a dog guy. And after everything happened, Nicole and Scout came by the firehouse with a card, and a cake for us. And at that point, I didn't even know Nicole's name. And I said, I really need to ask you your name since we talk to you every fourth day when we're working. And I just know that Scout is Scout. And so we introduced ourselves. And pretty much every time that I was working, Scout would be on his walk, and I would be walking out by the front door, and I would see him, and we'd spend some time talking, and the rest is just magic after that.
Yeah, and I mean it really goes to one of the things that I just think is so special when it comes to dogs too, right? Like just able to pick up on that energy and just be a especially like a lad like that, like Scout, just kind of being that, you didn't ask for an emotional support companion, but one's walking by the firehouse every day when you're working, and it's
Yeah,
gets you
yeah,
through it.
yep. And one of the unique things in Greenville is we have a sidewalk that runs up and down Central Avenue in Greenburgh, where in Fairview we got the occasional person on foot and we got the occasional bike. There's a lot more foot traffic in front of the firehouse in Greenville than there ever was in Fairview. And so if we stood outside, we had virtually a 100% chance of a public interaction of some sort with
Right.
people passing by the firehouse.
Front ramping it means something. You're gonna
Sure
engage the
does.
public.
100%. And even, there's always the joke about when, in Fairview, we didn't have a grocery store when I worked there. And now you guys have ShopRite there, right? Um,
Hmm.
we took it for granted down in Westchester that we had a ShopRite in a bunch of stores in our district and we could go out and do our grocery shopping for the meals and stuff like that. And there's always the one jokester out there like, hey, what's for dinner? I'm coming by tonight. What time is coffee or whatever, right? But the amount of public interaction that we had with residents or people coming through the district, and especially with their children, from front ramping it or from being at the grocery store or grabbing a coffee on our way back from a call, um, it's really special.
Yeah. So tragically, we lose Vito, and in the aftermath of this, you're not one to sit on your laurels and just mope about it, or like you start taking action. And before we get to the book, there's fundraisers and stuff that you're doing, because there's actually a pretty special organization out there called Guardian Revival. Can you kind of touch on what that story was, because I think it leads into where we're going to go next.
Yeah, so this is, I can take credit for very little of this. First and foremost, Local 1586 of the IAFF, Chris Duffelmeyer, our president, is the individual that linked our union up with Guardian Revival. And those, for you career guys out there, when the New York State Professional Firefighters sets up a health and safety expo or conference in your district, go to it. Even if it's just classroom training and not hands-on, even if some of the lectures sound like they might be boring and there might be one or two little trinkets to take from it, go to it, because that's how I found out about Guardian Revival. President Duffelmeyer brought in Guardian Revival as a way to help our district work and start having the conversation on mental health and wellness. And their former CEO, Alex Othmer, great guy, former Navy SEAL, was standing in front of the classroom talking about health, wellness. He played a video on YouTube called The Choice. It's a cartoon video. It's about 3 minutes long. Highly recommend watching that. And after his talk on wellness and what he went through in his personal journey, all of a sudden this nice lady named Rachel showed up with a bunch of puppies. And we learned about the Boots and Paws program. And the Boots and Paws program that Guardian Revival does provides training for both the dog and the new handler, and they provide companion dogs for military vets, first responders, firefighters, EMS, anyone who might need a companion dog to kind of help them get through tough times. And I've always had a dog, and it works. Like dogs are sometimes better than people. I think we could agree on that.
Yeah, 100%.
So right then and there, the light bulb came on, and I went and introduced myself to Rachel from Boots and Paws. And in Westchester County at the Fire Academy where we were, everybody's class photo was up there, right? And I saw your photo up there. Mine's up there. My name is still spelled wrong on mine. It's great. 22 years later, they never changed it, right? So I brought Rachel over to Vito's class, and I said, "This is my friend Vito, and this is what happened, and what can we do to have a fundraiser in his memory?" And from that moment on, we were hitting the ground running. And she told us that we had to raise $5,000, and that would provide a puppy, training for the puppy, training for the handler, the food, the shots, the health care for the dog, kind of stem to stern. And I said, okay, we can do that. And a few weeks later, we had $10,000 and two dogs, through Boots and Paws, for two first responders that now have really great dogs as their companion dogs.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then, like, so how, where did the idea for the book come from?
So doing a fundraiser on the internet, as you know, is exhausting. You know, let's think back to the Fairness for Fairview T-shirts. Before we had a lot of Facebook stuff, and before we had, sorry, call came through back here. So let's think back to those Fairness for Fairview T-shirts for a minute. How exhausting it was to get the mail, that how exhausting it was to collect the money and do that. Um, so now we're taking a fundraiser where we're asking for money from people, and it's attached to something that's so highly charged and emotional as the tragic loss of a friend. I kind of thought to myself that we need to have something a little more passive, so that we're not having um, a presentation of a dog every year. We're not asking online every year. And I also thought that, man, it would be really cool if we had something tangible that people could get for making a donation. So, if you remember Assistant Chief Tim Dexter from City of Newburgh, he wrote a book about Nick the fire dog.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked to him and said, "Hey, how do I do this? And this is my idea. And before I copy your idea, do you think it's okay?" And he said, "Absolutely. Tell the story." And so from there, I went to my Chief Spitaleri at Greenville, gave him my idea. He said, "Go with it." And I talked to Nicole, and Nicole said, "Tell your story." So there I was. In about, well, in less than a day, I had the story written. And then the real work started with finding a author, or not an author, rather, an illustrator to illustrate the book. And I didn't realize how much work was going to go into communicating with an illustrator to get every little detail right. And yeah, so I went from there. I learned from the University of YouTube on how to publish a book on Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing. And it's amazing what you can accomplish in this world if you can be trainable and teachable, and if you seek the information that you're looking for and you're patient in finding the correct information. And so from there, I worked with the illustrator, and when the illustrator gave me the price of the illustrations, I had a little bit of sticker shock. So I did what any good smart person would do. I went to the internet and I asked my friends to crowdsource it. And in less than 12 hours, the illustrations were funded by a group of really amazing human beings.
That is that is wild. So now the book is out there. I have a copy of it myself.
Mm-hmm.
And where people can find it on Amazon.
Yep. If you search Scout Mark Bendel, it'll pop right up on the top of the search list. The one thing I always try to tell people is, we got to kind of keep the algorithm going. Share it on Facebook, share it on Instagram, and if you like the book, if you buy one, leave a review on Amazon, because we want to get as many positive reviews as we can.
And I mean, this really at its crutch is to support mental health for first responders, and that because that's where the proceeds for this book are going. As you said, it's a passive income to come in instead of having to do this, grandiose and the logistics of running a fundraiser. Like Mark cannot, it is a lot. Like I mean, just from us doing the on tap events, and
Mm-hmm.
it's there's a lot to go into it.
Absolutely.
It's worth it, but it is a heavy lift. Where do you think that we are missing the point when it comes to mental health in the fire service?
Wow, that's a really good question. Um, I've talked with a bunch of people on this, and not necessarily fire service folks, One mutual friend of ours who is a member of the military is actually someone I lean on for some of this stuff. And I think that one of the things that we miss is we're always worried about covering shifts. We're always worried about what is the staffing in the building. And one thing that I thought about is when you look at some of the most like the high level military folks, the mantra that you see is they split everything into thirds. There's a third of the time that they're out there operating and doing what they do. There's a third of the time that they're in training and that all they're doing is training. And then a third of their time is their downtime. And I think one of the hardest grinds that we do is we do that training grind where we're training and then working, or working and then training. And a lot of us, myself included, all have at least one or more kind of secondary employment of some sort. Thankfully, mine was really intermittent versus like other people who had much more regular, almost second full-time jobs. And I think that one thing that we miss is we don't embrace the art of doing nothing for a little bit. Not all of us take the time to fully recover from a busy night, or we don't take the time to fully take stock of, you know, what's happening at home versus what just happened at work. And now we're kind of putting our barriers up because we don't want to deal with what's going on at home. And then that festers, and vice versa. You're dealing more with what's at home than what's happening at work. And, if we don't have a solid work-life balance, a lot of it's all for nothing.
And I think that the work life balance gets a bum rap nowadays, but it
Totally.
is important. And like you have to. I mean, I'm realizing it now more than ever in being bumped up to a position as a deputy chief, because it's like now you can't go. I mean, you can go home, but like setting the boundaries is tough, and it's something
Very
that I
much
have
so.
struggled with. But I even remember before, like I was still thinking about the job when I was at home on my days off. I was still thinking
Yep.
about the guys, like, hey, so finding that balance, and one of the things that I found recently is like trying to ground myself and really embrace meaningfulness to, you know, get myself grounded so that I'm present when I need to be present in certain aspects. It's just yeah, it's been a struggle,
Yeah, totally. You know
challenge.
what? Totally. And it's funny. I was thinking back to the Fairview days this morning while I was outside working on my lawn. Um, we have a fire service where, if we allow it, the firehouse has way more access to us than it ever had before. And think about the old days with the overtime, right? We had to fill out our shifts every month in Fairview, and you would get a phone call and be like, "Hey, pick two out of this giant list and get back to us in whatever time frame it was." And most of us lived local. We didn't live an hour away or have a 30-minute commute, so we'd stop in really quick in our travels. We'd pick our shifts and we'd go on about our day. And if it took an hour or two, nobody was in a rush. We didn't have smartphones. We didn't have an app for the overtime and the recalls and everything else. We had pagers at home, and if you didn't want to get paged in for the recall, you shut the pager off unless the phone
Right.
rang. And we didn't have DoorDash to order our meals. We had to actually go out and pick up takeout food or order it. Like, getting delivery in those days was almost unheard of. We weren't paying for delivery. We're going to hop in the rig and go pick it up from
Yeah.
somewhere in the
Yeah.
district because we're going to support our local businesses. And and even to the point where, I'm going to sound really old. There wasn't social media. There was barely a wireless router in the firehouse. There weren't phones and laptops everywhere. We almost were forced to interact with one another and have a good time.
Yeah. I
And
mean, keep going. You're on it.
yeah, no, and it's like, I remember one day where we were out in the backyard of Fairview. Fairview had the greatest backyard and still has one of the greatest backyards in the history of the fire service, right? And we had the radios out there. The rigs were parked in the north lot, and we were just playing football and frisbee all day as kind of like our way to blow off steam in the middle of a 48-hour stint. And like, everybody was smiling and laughing. And man, we pick up these screens now, we pick up the phones, and I'm guilty of it just like everybody else. But what a distraction, what it takes away from, with the brotherhood and the sisterhood and the camaraderie in the firehouse.
Yeah. There is something to be said about unplugging, and that the fact that the firehouse does have that access, and that one thing we have to understand is that we allow it to have the access.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be that, and I think sometimes people get confused with like being dedicated to the job and being into the job versus like taking care of themselves, and that's where the lines start to get blurred, especially when it
Yep.
comes to the mental health side of it. We're not we're not taking care of ourselves, and then all of a sudden, there's that straw that breaks the camel's back, and
Yeah.
we're left to pick up the pieces, and it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah. Hours worked does not equal dedication or productivity.
Right.
That's one of the
100%.
big mantras that I've always had in my career. There are people that can do amazing things in one day that others can't do in 4 days of working, and
Right.
that's not an insult or a jab at anyone. It's just what it is. And some people are really good at being there for long stretches of time. That's not one of my fortes in my career. Um, and other people are really good at being there when they need to be there to get the job that they need to do done.
Yeah. What is the is it, how does this book and publishing it? Because, like I said, I know it's in memory of Vito. Like, where is this on the list of things for you in your career as a highlight? Is this like one of the top five?
Yeah, easily top five. I feel like we're going to be on the Dave Letterman top 10 list in a few minutes, but
Right.
but yeah, no, this is something really special, and it's funny because a mutual friend of ours from law enforcement said, "Wow, you created that, like you made that book," and I think that the story made itself. I think that I was just able to kind of tell the story and bring it to the world. Um, and when I think back through 21 and a half years of being a firefighter, um, no matter what the negativity from any faction, so to speak, was, we always got in the rig, we always got out there, we always did our jobs, and we always went above and beyond to treat people correctly. I think about what Sheriff Butch Anderson up here in Dutchess County always said: treat people the way you'd want to be treated. And especially at Fairview and especially down in Westchester, that was one big thing that I was on with my guys. Everybody that we take care of gets treated like their family. And we treat them like that because we know that we would want our brothers and sisters in another jurisdiction treating our family with care,
Right.
compassion, and concern. And the other part of it is, we Fairness for Fairview is kind of like the easy target here. They tried every last thing they could in that time to make us look like we were not needed, and that the fire department wasn't important. They thought the fire department was a waste of money. And really, in reality, the fire department is critical infrastructure. The hardest part of the fire department in fire protection in general, especially in New York, is how it's funded and where those imaginary lines on the maps end up. And the firehouse is part of the community. Um, Whether you live in the jurisdiction that you serve in is almost irrelevant, because ultimately you end up living in that jurisdiction 30 to 40% of your life, whether you own property there or not. And when you interact with the community that you serve, it could be at the grocery store, just having a friendly conversation with one of the people in the grocery store. Could be on the front ramp talking with Scout and giving some scratches on his head. It could just be in the way you carry yourself in public, and people are watching. It's really important. The firehouse is one of those last places where if people need help, they will knock on the door and they'll ask for help, and without question, we will give them help.
Yeah. I I always think of, and I think it actually was you who I first heard it from. We're the only government agency that can enter somebody's residence without the use of a search warrant, and they trust us to lock the door on the way back out. And it is the beauty of what the fire service really is.
It's a
So
really special thing. It's a really special thing. And they expect you to show up. Well, I think I'm going to paraphrase what the Chicago battalion chief guy said. They want people that are as tough as the Marine Corps, with the intelligence of a Harvard PhD, coming to their house and knowing exactly what to do, when and how, with, you know, with an unlimited amount of trust. And it's a really big deal that's kind of taken for granted by the public and us for that matter too.
Yeah. So so we can kind of summarize up here and kind of close out the books out there. How many states do you like? Do you know? Do you have a good tracking of how far the book's traveled so far?
So it's funny. Just today, if you look at Horry County Fire Rescue in South Carolina, Battalion Chief Charlie Nash read the book to his local library and donated a copy, and the PIO at Horry County just posted about this today, so it's public knowledge now, which is pretty cool. Um, a lot around New York, a lot in Connecticut. As crazy as this sounds, my mother called me today and dropped the book off, donated to my elementary school library where I went in East Haven, which I think is pretty neat. Um,
Yeah.
and I've been seeing some stuff from Florida, some stuff from I think California, but there's really no way to track where it's going. Amazon lets you track how many get sold, but it's like a 7-day snapshot of what's going on.
Right.
So I'm just kind of letting it go on a wing and a prayer.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, like I said, if you're out there listening and you have kids, or even if you don't have kids, check this book out. I mean, like I said, I have a copy myself. It's probably going to get donated to either a local library or it's going to end up in my niece's collection for sure. But like I said, Scout, the Firehouse Mascot, a true story. In memory of our friend Vito, this was, like I said, it's an important organizations that the money is going to, and also just a good book for the kids. Like I said, I've read it. It took me a very long time, but it was one of the best books that I know. It was, but it's like the illustrations were on point, and I just, like I said, I was extremely proud of you, Mark,
Thank you.
for taking tragedy and making it into something to something positive, there's like that's for me that's the lesson in there. Where can people find you if they want to reach out and either talk to you about the book or just talk to you in general?
So I'm pretty reachable. On Instagram, my at sign is Tactical Silverado. I also run a business, so it's West Mountain Official on Instagram as well for the side business. If you're in New York and need some of the stuff that we can offer, and from there, I'm on Facebook, but I try to keep it to friends and family and colleagues that I've met in person before. And if you want to take a look at the book, it's on Amazon. Just search up Scout and Mark Bendel, and that will bring you right to the page where you can buy it. And if you have questions or you want to reach out, I'm absolutely open to hearing from folks, especially if you read the book and you like it. Nothing is cooler than getting a review or a photo or something like that on the book and somebody saying, "Hey, good job," because I know then that it's making an impact.
Awesome. Mark, is there anything else you want to add into this before we wrap it up?
Yeah, the responsibility that we have in the fire service is a really awesome one. The public trusts us to protect them. The kids and the younger folks in our area look at us like we're superheroes, whether we know it or not. It's a really awesome responsibility to protect the public. And the one thing that I learned as an officer is the even bigger responsibility of protecting the brothers and sisters that you're in charge of. Um, Everything that we do, everything that we see has an effect on us. With the mental health stuff and all that. And the I guess the parting piece of advice that I would give to everyone out there who's still active and working, look out for one another and never feel bad about asking if someone's okay or not. At the very least, you might embarrass yourself or look a little silly, but at the very best, you might just save someone's life. And when it comes to the nonsense from the bean counters and the politicians, um, they don't do our job. They don't know what it's like to be out there doing what we do. And we can't hold that against them. They're just trying to do their job, deflect the nonsense, and keep on going with the mission, because the mission that we take part in is a noble one and it's a necessary one.
So, well, Mark, thank you for
Thank you,
coming
Rob.
on and talking about all of this with me and the story of the book. and where its roots came from. And obviously the other thing I'd ask is everybody, if you check out the book and also check out Guardian Revival and the Boots and Paws program, because it's doing wonderful things for our first responders and our military community. So we will catch you guys on the next one. This is Rob from Frontline Mindset. Thank you for tuning in. Get the book on Amazon. Like I said, go out and get it. Scout the Firehouse Mascot, a true story. Look that up on Amazon, and we will see you guys on the next one.